for any creator listening, would you rather have a comfortable mid to low six figures a year, or would you rather work your ass off, be stressed all the time, and make $1 million or $2 million a year? And death is in the middle. What I've noticed is I think a lot of creators don't have.
He was just a guy with a blog. But when he told the world to stop giving a fuck, 20 million people listened.
So what are the biggest things as you went in 18 months from basically nothing on YouTube to 1 million subscribers?
Like if you go back and look at the biggest YouTube videos from like 2018, they feel unwatchable now. If we're not improving 10% every year, we're losing. New entrepreneurs think it's the idea that's going to make the business work. I think it's the same thing with creators. It's like, even if you do come up with a really good idea, somebody's going to rip it off in a week. So what makes you unique?
What do you notice in the people who endure versus those who fizzle out?
The thing that blew up your audience was actually a 2-year trend. The trend recedes, suddenly your revenue drops by half. So if you build an audience, one of your top priorities should be.
Something you've talked about is how there's an ideal size to a creator business, and there's actually some traps that you can fall into.
Right.
And so maybe talk about what does it look like at, I was going to say a small size, but we're talking, $1 million or several million a year in revenue, which isn't that small.
Potentially, yeah.
But yeah, what are the two ends of the spectrum that you think about when it comes to size of a creator business?
What I've noticed over the years is there's kind of two optimal points. One is super lean. You can call it like the minimal. And then the other optimal point is, we'll call it maximal, right? The minimum, the super lean creator business, I think it's generally like one really good revenue stream. And it's probably a team of between 1 to 4 people. And you're basically just milking that one revenue stream really strongly. It's high margins. But because it's only one revenue stream, there's usually almost always a low ceiling on it, like maybe low 7 figures, kind of like as big as it gets. But you're like a team of 3 people.
Right.
You probably have one major platform that you're focused on. Things are relatively simple, and it's a good life. It's a great way to make a living, right? I think the other optimal point is when you're doing multiple revenue streams extremely well. So you're doing really well with brand sponsorships on YouTube and podcast, and you've got merch lines, and you've got back-end products, and you're doing live events. That requires like a team of probably 15, 20, 25 people. But that's like an 8-figure business, right? And death is in the middle. Like what I've noticed is a lot of creators, when they blow up and they hit that kind of first stage, minimal viable creator business, life's good, but then, it's just human nature. You always want more. You see the next guy, you see Mr. Beat, you're like, I want to do that. And so you start hiring people, and then you're like, let's launch t-shirts. Let's do a meetup. Let's do a live event. Let's do a seminar. And next thing you know, you've got 15, 20 people. But if you don't, it's a completely different skill set on the other side of that chasm. It's less about the creative. It's more about organizational skills, management skills, building the right team. You're a business person essentially. And I think a lot of creators don't have the same aptitude or the same desire to essentially be a CEO.
Right.
And so they get lost in the middle. They hire 6 or 7 or 8 people. They're like, oh my God, this is so much work. The first thing we tried didn't work. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm spending all my money. And they just get kind of stuck. And then the gravitational pull pulls them back to that kind of original minimal small business.
People assume that more is better.
Yeah.
Bigger is better. And that's a linear path in some way. So if it was making $1 million a year and I had 3 employees, it's a pretty great business, right?
Yep.
Like, let's assume that if you're really spending a bunch across ads, your team, all of that, all in, the business is costing $500,000 a year and you're pocketing $500,000 a year, and yet it's not all on your shoulders, right?
Yeah.
When you go on vacation, the Instagram reels still go out, the customer support emails get answered, and the community stays lively.
Yeah.
Right. And so then we go from there and say like, okay, well, maybe 10 people and 2 million is a good thing.
Yeah.
Or 12 people and 3, or like up from there, and not realizing that that's where so many problems come, which is what you're getting at. But then the other thing is that we assume that revenue will keep growing at the same rate.
Right.
So if I went from 250,000 to 500,000 to $1 million, then the next year I assume that I'm going to go to 2 million.
Right.
Even though that it's like, well, I doubled last year. Let me double this year. And we don't look at it from the fundamentals of saying, what is actually going to double? Is your email list going to double?
Yeah. Is
your conversion rate going to double? This new product that you come out with, or we assume like if we're launching the same course over and over again, that's going to sell that many more copies. And often it sells less because you saturated.
I was just going to say, it's not even the assumption that it's going to continue to grow. Sometimes we don't even realize like, oh, we might have just caught, like this might have just been a moment that I caught perfectly. And 2 years from now, the moment's going to be gone and nobody wants to buy this anymore. And that's another trap that I see all the time. Creators, they have the moment. They're like part of the zeitgeist. They blow up, build a huge audience, but they don't step back and think, okay, is this am I providing sustainable value? Like, is this something that 10 years from now, these people are still going to want to watch and learn and see and buy the t-shirt or the hoodie or whatever? Or is this just a moment, right? And I think I have seen that a lot of people overestimate how sustainable their business is. I mean, the most obvious example is like something like the Haktua girl, right? Like she's making bank right now. She also seems smart and knowing that this isn't going to last. Like this is probably her 15 minutes. She's cashing in big. She's like launching a podcast.
To be clear, she named her company 16 Minutes.
So yeah, there you go. There you go. So that's like perfect. Like she's very aware of the moment she's in. But I think in her case, like it's pretty obvious. Like it's a meme that went viral and she's riding off the back of that wave. But I've seen it too. I mean, there's anything from, there's certain topics that trend for multiple years. Something like baking sourdough bread was huge in 2020 and 2021. I imagine whoever is monetizing that vertical, like their revenue has dropped like 80% in the last 3 years, right? But when you initially catch that wave, you're just so excited to be on the wave that you don't think about that.
Yeah, so you have to think about what macro trends have you attached yourself to, and what's going to happen with that, and then your ability to capture and sustain the market within that. Now, the sourdough bread is an example. There's a creator on Kit who that is his niche that I'm thinking about, and he's done a really good job of bringing people to his email list, to his core audience. And I don't know the numbers. I would guess his audience isn't growing at the same rate.
Yeah.
But from some things that we've done with him, I think a case study we did on him, it was one of those things where he's built this, he's taken the people that he captured in that wave, and now he's built this like really sustainable business off of it. Instead of thinking like, oh, it's going to double the next year, or that sort of thing. I'm guessing now he's making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and has built a great business, but not, he didn't try to scale it to the multiple millions.
Yeah. And I actually think what the Haktua girl is doing is smart. I saw she just launched a podcast, which what she's probably doing, she's like, okay, I have all this attention. I need to build a relationship,
right?
Because I'm not going to have this attention very soon for very long. But if I can build a relationship with tens of thousands of these people, then I can build a business off of it. Like I can actually have a career. So there's like a second step that it's not just blowing up and building the audience. You then have to build the relationship with the audience to make sure that they stick with you when the trend or the exciting thing that blew up for you is no longer cool.
Well, I think choosing the format that fits your personality and all of that, like something that she has going for her is, with her accent and the way that she talks, she's like charming and endearing, and like you just kind of want her to succeed.
Yeah.
More so than a bunch of other like viral moments. And so a podcast is a format that lends itself well. Like if she was saying like, I'm going to start a blog, we'd be like, okay.
What? Yeah.
But she's like, she chose the medium that's going to help build that relationship. Now we'll see if there's substance to it long-term or how it goes. I think that's a good way to go. I want to go back to the death in the middle though, because you and I could probably list off 10 people or more that we know, either tangentially or friends of ours who have hit some level of plateau,
Yeah.
And then had to scale back teams or just found they didn't enjoy it anymore.
Yeah.
Of like, actually, this is really, having $2 million a year in payroll and a product that I have to keep selling that doesn't recur in some way is actually really stressful. And I don't like this.
Yeah. It really raises that difficult question of like, would you rather have a comfortable mid to low six figures a year, or would you rather work your ass off, be stressed all the time, feel overwhelmed, have all these demands, and make $1 million or $2 million a year? Is the juice really worth the squeeze? And I think for most people, it's easy. I really admire people who are able to spot that trap and like not go there.
Right.
Because I think for most of us, like, no, you got to go make the 2 million first to realize that you fucking hate your life and you want to fire half your team and scale back. Right. That seems to be like the standard process. The lifestyle business, I think, is probably the optimal point for most people. Like the only people that I think probably should try to cross that chasm is if you really love business.
Right.
Like if you love the business side, if you love hiring people and managing and strategizing and figuring out, negotiating deals and stuff.
Yeah. One thing I'm thinking about is Tyler Cowen has this question that he asks of what's the production function of, you as an individual.
Yeah.
And something that I notice is that a lot of people find something that works. Let's say they're writing on LinkedIn, right? And that they figure this out and that just works really well. And then they listen to a podcast like this. Yeah. Someone is on talking about like Instagram growth is the secret. And they're like, I got to do short form video, and so they stop doing the thing that's working well, or they start to spread themselves out, and they, that's how you end up in all these different channels. Or you assume, hey, I built $1 million a year business writing on LinkedIn.
Right.
If I can get to 100,000 followers on Instagram, that will add another $1 million a year. And pretty soon you lose the core production function, which might have been the 2 hours every morning that you spend like writing and your process. It's like, I consume this information, I distill it down in my art form,
totally,
and I distribute it in this way. And we just repeat that over and over and over again, and it compounds.
Yeah.
And then as you expand to other channels, like you stop doing all of those things and it falls apart.
And not only that, and again, I can think of so many people this is true with, they'll go build that Instagram and they get that 100,000 followers on Instagram, and they realize that their followers on Instagram convert 50 times worse than the followers on LinkedIn.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And that's completely normal. It's like in my business, a follower on different platforms is valued completely differently. Like I have friends, like I'll say he won't mind. He's also a Kit customer. So Dan Go, 90% of his business comes through Twitter or X. Like he and I have talked about it before. Basically none of my customers come through Twitter or X. And so like I've talked to him before and he's like, hey man, I can help you like grow on Twitter and like if you start doing this. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I appreciate that. But like I kind of don't give a shit because like nobody on Twitter buys anything. And and he's like, really? Like all my customers come from Twitter. So it's different for every brand. It's different for every business. And I think it's really it's important to understand that and just know that like where are your customers? Because I think like being multi-platform is good, I guess, but I see it as kind of like an ecosystem. Each platform kind of plays a role. Everything's a little bit there. Like each audience serves a different purpose within my business.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like the Twitter followers, they're not my customers. It's a place that I can engage with like thoughtful, smart, successul people.
Yeah,
essentially.
It's very good for that. I want to get into the different roles that the platforms play, but maybe we'll take a little bit of a step back and just give the high level version of, how you got to be the established. Can I call you the old man in the creative world?
I feel that way. I totally feel that way, man. I get so.
What are you all at 40 now?
I know I'm only 40, but it's so funny. Like I get invited to. Since I moved to LA, I'll go out to like some dinners and stuff with creators or get invited to like meetups and stuff. And I'm always the oldest person in the room. There have been multiple YouTubers, especially, like there have been multiple YouTubers that I started my business when they were in elementary school.
Right.
And and they're just like, whoa. I'm like, let me tell you about the days before there was a news feed. And they're like, whoa. No, actually that doesn't happen. But
They're just like,
they're like,
cool.
they're like, yeah, whatever, old man.
But the point is, you've seen a lot of waves of
Yes.
the creator economy long before it was called the creator economy, and
Yes.
and have been building iterations of this business
Totally.
for a long time.
Totally.
Yeah. So, what are the biggest things as you went from? I mean, did it take you 18 months, 2 years to go basically nothing on YouTube to 1 million subscribers? Granted, you have a big audience in other places.
I mean, the beauty is that the book is a tailwind everywhere, right? So I think I launched the channel, I had a few simple videos. I did some during the pandemic. So I think when
Everybody's got that YouTube channel that's like, it's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
But it's not, I'm not serious about it.
So I think I started with a couple 100,000 subs, and I think we hit 1 million in about a year, and then now we're at like 2.5.
Okay.
I feel like we're just now figuring it out. Like actually I just saw a cut this morning of one of the videos that we're putting out this fall, and it's the first time I've seen a cut, and I'm like, that's it. That's what we need to be.
What's different?
It's so again, this is gonna sound sick, but for me this was like fun, right? It's the same process that every creator goes through when they're starting out, right? Like the first like 20 things you make are just bad. And then there's this whole process of figuring out why they're bad. And then you get better at some things and you have some new ideas and you're like, oh, this is going to be the big thing that blows up. And you try that and you put 3 months of work into it and you try it and you put it out and like nobody cares. So I had to go through that whole process again. And a big part of that is just me learning the skill set, like learning video production, understanding basic things like lighting, framing, cameras, being good on camera, speaking well. Script writing is different than other forms of writing, so like that took a while to get better at. And then with video in particular, like you need a big team, so it's hiring the right people, finding the right editors, getting a good producer. That whole process took like 1.5 years probably.
I mean, if you were to break down one of your videos that really worked well, and then see like, maybe explain the video and then what went into the concepting and
Sure.
if you're trying to replicate it, how you would go about that.
Okay. Well, so the original thesis, when I start, I'll just give you like a brief timeline of like my YouTube strategy.
Sounds good.
My original, when I decided, okay, I'm going to focus really hard on YouTube, I had a couple quick wins, but I honestly, in hindsight, I think a lot of that was just people were excited. Mark Manson's on YouTube, right? So there were a handful of videos that got 2 or 3 million views, but I think a lot of that, there was just a big tailwind of like awareness that was happening. I realized very early on, and this was like late 22, early 23, the talking head format, which is essentially, for people who don't know, it's like the guy sitting at a desk explaining something to you. The talking head format was already becoming extremely saturated. And you could see that, like, if Ali Abdaal put up a video that did really well, within 2 weeks, 4 other channels had videos with basically the same title and similar intro and, just a slightly edited script, right?
Yeah, so much YouTube advice is find what works.
Yep.
Copy that.
And I started to notice the same thing with me too. Like a couple of videos that blew up for me within a month, this other channel has basically got the same title, almost the same thumbnail, slightly changed intro, and he's saying the same thing, and it's one of the best performers on his channel. And I'm like, okay, this fucking sucks. This is not going to last, right? Like there's no, it's not hard to see what the end game of that is that you're just going to burn, not your own audience, the entire talking head video audience is going to get burnt out within a few years because they're just going to start seeing the same thing over and over and over on every single channel. So I'm like, okay, step 1 is to get out of talking heads. Figure out what is the new format that I can do that feels new and fresh and innovative and is not easily replicable. Like, what is a video format that if I go do it and it blows up and gets 5 million views, all the other YouTubers look at it and be like, oh man, I can't do that.
That's too hard.
Yeah, I can't do that. Yeah.
What makes them feel excited and then discouraged?
Yes, exactly. Like, how do we break their hearts? But I mean, there is a really important principle in here for any creator listening, is that if what you're doing is easily replicable, it's not a long-term business.
Right.
Period. You're going to get competed out because you have to find something that you can do that is really, really hard for other people to do. And like you mentioned Casey Neistat earlier, like he is such an amazing filmmaker. Like the content of a Casey Neistat video is almost shockingly banal. Like it's like him going and getting lunch and then telling you about his run. And anybody else on earth, I would be bored and I would click off in 20 seconds. But it is shot so well. The editing is so crisp. And it's like so stylistic and everything that it's like, yeah, that's a Casey Neistat video, and nobody's ever going to replicate that. And if you manage to, everybody would be like, oh, you just ripped off Casey Neistat, right? So it's like you want to find that thing, but that's like a long process. So I started looking at like, okay, what are some things that I can do, or some resources or advantages that I have that other people can't? And I actually went way back. I was like, I used to coach people. I used to coach people through anxiety, and I used to help people with their relationship problems and emotional issues and whatever. And I was like, there's all these self-help people on YouTube, but nobody's actually talking to people, right? Nobody's actually like bringing somebody in and like putting them through some exercises, asking them questions, and like showing the result. So we tried that, and mixed result. It was basically like 10 times more difficult to shoot than we expected. And then the result was, I think we did 5 videos of that format, and I think 2 did really well, 2 did okay, and then 1 bombed. But I was like spending probably 15, 20K per shoot. It was like 3 to 4 months of production for each video. And I'm like, we're basically getting like slightly, but like basically the same result as just me sitting at a desk. So I'm like, it's really hard to justify this.
So like, what's an example of one of those videos?
So we took a woman who had suffered with social anxiety her entire life. And at certain points it had been crippling. And in the very beginning of the video, I take her to a mall and I'm like, just go ask that guy sitting at the table, like where he's from. And she like couldn't do it. Yeah. And by the end, we got her to give a improvised speech in front of 50 people for 10 minutes.
That makes me nervous.
Yes. And she
pre-written, I can do it.
And she fucking did it. And she was like in tears, and it was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. Unfortunately, like the interesting thing about those videos is like going into it, I was like really nervous of like, okay, can I actually coach these people and get some sort of result? Right. That part ended up not being very hard because we had so many applications that we could like really vet people beforehand, and I could kind of find the person of like, okay, she seems like ready and coachable, and like it won't be hard to get a result. It was the actual video production that was so fucking hard. I'm like, it's actually really hard to go it's hard to go in a mall and get a good shot. It's like really fucking complicated. So I completely underestimated that side of it. So we shelved that. Towards the end of it, we were doing one of those videos. It was going to require me having to go to Korea. Don't ask. And I remember talking to my producer, and I was like, the story of this video kind of needs me to go to Korea with her, but fuck, Korea's really far. Like, it's so expensive. Like, how do we justify this? And he was like, well, what if we do another video while we're there? And I was like, that's not a bad idea. And we had talked internally about like kind of an Anthony Bourdain style. Mark goes to another country and like looks at like mental health issues around that country. And Korea has the highest suicide rate in the world. So I was like, we could do a video on the suicide epidemic, the mental health crisis in Korea. And I was like, my books did really well in Korea. I could probably reach out to my publisher and get interviews, get on TV shows and get interviews with like celebrity psychologists and all this stuff. So we did all that. And we put that video together. It was 5 times easier than the coaching videos, and it just immediately blew up. And And like the qualitative response to the video was just like, this is amazing. There's nothing like this. Oh my God, you need to do more of these, all this stuff. So this summer we went and shot 4 more of those in different countries. And so we're launching that in the fall. And that's basically going to become the new YouTube format, is kind of an investigation into the intersection of mental health and culture around the world. Like, why does Hungary have more alcoholics than any other country in the world? Like, what is it about their history, their culture, their economic situation? Like, what drives that? And so we went to Budapest and we shot for 4 days, and like that video is going to be coming out. So super excited about it. It took a long time to get here. But the video is like the cut I saw this morning was one we did in Portugal, and I watched the first 5 minutes and I was like, finally. We found it. We found it. Like, this is it. This is what we're supposed to be doing.
Even as I think about it through the lens of what is totally unique, what plays to your strengths that others can't replicate. You know, the coaching someone through social anxiety, it requires skill, but there's 10,000, 100,000 people that have that skill, right? That could do that in some way. But then as you get into things of like you have a background in travel already, right? And doing a lot of location independent things from the beginning, it leverages the book in a great way, because you're like, oh, I can get, you can use these clips of you on TV in Korea asking.
Which we did, which is, it's such a hack. It's such a hack, because it's anybody I want to interview in any of these countries, I can get the interview. If I want to do a meetup with fans, send an email and it's done, right? Like so it really, that ended up being like, you're dead on. That ended up being the secret sauce, is like, I have access that other people don't have access. And as you said, I lived abroad for 7 years. I was a digital nomad for 7 years, and my career, all the books and the movie and everything, it took me abroad to dozens and dozens of countries. I've promoted books in like 20 different countries. I've like promoted a movie in multiple different countries. So it's like I have exposure to these cultures, and I've already seen how my Korean fans are different from my Australian fans, and thought about why that is, right? So it like fits kind of perfectly. But it's funny because you still have to stumble for a year, spend a bunch of time and money to
get to that point,
to find the thing that in hindsight it seems obvious.
Well, yeah, because you want it to be like, you sit down at the spreadsheet or with the journal in the coffee shop, and you're like, if I just think on this problem long enough, I will come to that perfect fit. And it comes from, you might get 20% of the way there.
Yes.
And find the thread that you need to keep pulling to get there. Now, a lot of people could be listening and saying like, okay, sure, like, we found what, if I had sold, I don't know, 20 million copies of a book or that sort of thing, then I would play to those strengths as well. So I think what I want to dive into is if we were to help creators find those strengths, like, I'm thinking about what I have access to that others don't.
Right.
I like, despite building a more behind the scenes individual brand, it's just like, I can text you and James and Ramit and so many others and be like, hey, what's working here? Or what's, like, I have this lens. And so, like, I could make a show that is entirely like what's working behind the scenes to build creative businesses. And that's like something that I could take an angle on it that puts me in like a 0.1% or less of creators that could do that. But if you're thinking about other creators, how would you go about, coaching someone onto finding their really unique angle?
I think it can come from a number of different things. It can come from personality. It can come from just being incredibly skilled in one area, being disproportionately experienced in one area. Generally when I look at any really successful creator, there's some aspect about them that is just so disproportionate compared to most people. It's either they're insanely charismatic, or they're extremely analytical and well-spoken, or they just have this absurd talent editing. It's finding whatever, one of the questions I ask people a lot is like, what comes easily to you, but other people complain about? Like, what's the thing that other people complain about and you like don't understand what they're complaining? You're like, well, yeah, I know. Like that was true with me with blogging. Like I would go to these conferences and everybody would come up, like all these people would come up to me and they're like, man, you publish like 10-page articles multiple times a week. Like, how do you do that? How much do you write? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't really think about it, And I was like, how much do you write? And they're like, oh, I'm trying to get like one blog post out a week and it's only like a page or two. And I'm like, really? Like, I just didn't understand. I'm like, why is that hard for you? And then it took me a couple of years to realize like, because this is, when I started my career, I'm like, oh, I'm going to build an e-commerce business and I'm going to do coaching and consulting and all this stuff. And I got a couple of years in, I'm like, well, no, I'm not great at all that stuff. I'm great at writing, apparently. Like, this is my advantage. So one of it is just what comes naturally to you, what comes easily to you. What do you have just like, I think you see with like a lot of the chess creators, right? Like it's a lot of them, it was probably this weird thing that their parents forced them to do. Like if you look at like the Botez sisters or something, it's like their parents are making them go to chess lessons when they're 4 years old. And probably for most of their young life, they're like, I got to do the chess thing again. And the kids at school are making fun of them and stuff. And then it's like, oh, actually the fact that you've been playing chess since you were 4 is a superpower because now you're like a world-class chess player and you can build this amazing audience and like do all this cool stuff. So it's find the thing that is just really disproportionate about you that other people, again, it comes back to like other people can't easily replicate.
Yeah, that's interesting. And getting into the skills, connections, all of those things, you could list out 6 or 8 categories and see, okay, rate yourself in these categories. What comes easily to you? What's really, really hard? And you can weave something that is custom fit to you.
Yeah. And what I found is, I think, and I definitely did this too, I think creators really overestimate the value of the ideas.
Yeah.
It's actually similar in business as well. It's like new entrepreneurs think it's the idea that's like, it's going to make the business work. And, I think it's the same thing with creators. It's like, there's nothing special about, even if you do come up with a really good idea, somebody's going to rip it off in a week. So what makes you unique? What makes your spin on it unique? Like, how are you approaching it in a way that's completely different than anybody else and can be immediately identifiable as you, right? When I was starting out, when my blog started blowing up, I kind of went through this period where I'm like, well, I just have all these great ideas. Like, clearly I'm just like really fucking smart and like nobody can stand up to the power of my brain. And then I realized I'm like, no, it's essentially like at the time the self-help market was very touchy-feely, woo-woo, you're amazing, everybody's going to love you. Just believe in yourself, right, Nathan. It's going to be okay. Like that was, and I was the guy who was like, hey, go fuck yourself. You're not that important. Right. Life's going to go on. Like that helped me differentiate myself. There was nothing special about the ideas. What was special was just like my abrasive personality around it.
Yeah. It wasn't like this soft bubble coming around you. It was just like this hard truth. One thing that I want to talk about more a little bit is the longevity of what it takes to endure in the creator economy for, 10 years or more. A lot of people are looking like 2 or 3 years out. And then, you and I are looking at this and be like, we're going to be doing some version of what we're doing now for another decade.
At least. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what do you notice in the people who endure versus those who fizzle out?
I think once you've built an audience, the only way it's kind of, there are a lot of ways you can fuck it up, but 90% of the time it's because you fucked it up. Let me try to go through them. The first and most obvious one, we can call it burnout. I would also say in a lot of cases, it's people don't realize what they're signing up for. Like it's when you become somewhat famous, when your face becomes recognizable to millions of people, a lot of people really don't like the experience. And I think that's fine. I think it's okay to think you want something, and then when you get it, you're like, oh, actually, I don't want this. So I see that quite a bit, that people, they they put all the work in, they build the brand, and then once they get there, they discover it actually makes them very unhappy. And so that's one category, and I think that's probably like the most justifiable category, that just kind of blow up your own business and go away and do something else. I would say audience capture is something that I've seen a lot of creators succumb to, which is you always have to be careful. You know, you want to give your audience what they want, but you also don't want to give them everything they want, because then you lose yourself and you start just becoming a hack who's like reflecting back to people whatever they want to see. And the thing about the internet is that the loudest engagement comes from the craziest people. So if you're always just trying to reflect back to your audience what they want to hear, what you don't realize is that you're reflecting, you're turning into the crazy minority of your audience, and you're ignoring the silent, like sane majority. Yeah. And the silent sane majority is what actually pays the bills and is going to keep you around forever. So watch so many creators go down that. A lot of podcasters go down that path. I've seen people scale too fast. Mm-hmm. You know, they hit it big, they have a windfall, they go out and hire. I mean, we were talking about Matt Davella. He posted a video about this. You know, it's like things blow up, you start making a bunch of money, and you're like, well, what do I do next? Well, I guess I hire people. All right, let's go hire a bunch of people. Let's do more videos. And then they don't realize that as you scale, the complexity and the challenges scale as well, right, proportionally. And then you can end up in a situation where either you don't want to manage those people, or the thing that blew up your audience was actually just like a 2-year trend, and the trend recedes, and suddenly your revenue drops by half, and now you have a team of 10 people and you're like making zero profit. So I see that happen a lot as well. The lack of diversification. Any of these platforms can change their algorithm at any point. They can shadow ban you. They can cancel you, like justified or unjustified. I've seen it happen a million times. It's like, if you build an audience, one of your top priorities should be immediately getting that audience to a newsletter. Yeah. Because if Meta or Google or TikTok comes out tomorrow with a completely new algorithm and your engagement drops 80%, you're fucked otherwise. And I've seen that 100 times. I've seen so many times.
It's the people who really thrived on Twitter and then X are the ones that built their audience there and simultaneously on email.
Yes.
And then now that X throttles links so much. Yeah. You know, an outright ban Substack, right? Like, you never know when you know.
So much for free speech.
Yeah, exactly. But then, you know, as these things happen, then it's totally different scenario. Yes. And so I know people who have hundreds of thousands of followers on X and don't really have a business because they can no longer get those followers to another platform. Yeah. Or those followers don't exist on X anymore. Mm-hmm. But then I also know people like Dan Go and plenty of others who are like, what are you talking about? This is great. Yeah. I have 100,000 people on my Kit newsletter and 200,000 people on X. And it means that I can hit the same people 2 different ways. Right. Like short form wisdom, quick hits on X, the long form newsletter, people cross link between them. And they're like, this is a thriving ecosystem. Yeah. Because they're diversified. Totally. And they did it early before the algorithm cracked down on you know, cross linking. Yeah. And then one of the things I'm really proud of that I think is paying off quite a bit is we built into the newsletter an invitation so like I give I'll ask people a question and then offer like a challenge for the week. And then I tell people, email me back, reply to this email and let me know how this went for you this week. So, you know, today try practicing gratitude first thing in the morning, whatever, this week, and then let me know how it went. And so we'll get a few hundred people replying saying like, oh my God, I tried this and this is what happened. And, you know, so we get all these stories. But as you know, that's like really good for engagement. Like the email servers like love that. So it's good both for the community and for deliverability. Do you feature any of those stories? Yes. So every email we feature 2 to 3 of those stories, and occasionally we'll have a reader question that I answer. So it's like fostering this. The content flywheel on that is really strong. Yeah. and it fits very closely, right?
Yes.
I've seen people do this with, asking, hey, what's your biggest frustration learning this skill, or, in the niche that we're talking about, and, hit reply and let me know. And then I will write, my next essay about that, or I'll pull from that backlog. But I like yours because it's really lightweight.
Yes.
And then people see their name listed. What's the quote of, now it's a famous copywriter talking about, like, everyone's favorite word is their own name.
Of course. Yeah.
And so it's just, like printing their names in the newspaper and all of that. That's what you're doing.
It also feeds into the marketing as well, because so newsletter is called Your Next Breakthrough, and we call them breakthroughs. So we're like, if you have a breakthrough, email us back and let us know. Yeah. And then my newsletter manager, she goes through all the emails each week, and she'll pull like the best 5 or 10 and show them to me, and then I'll pick the ones that we want to feature. But we built like a little script that tracks all of the breakthrough replies that we get. And so we keep a running count. We keep a count both per newsletter and for the entire newsletter as a whole. And so like we hit 10,000 breakthroughs maybe like 6 months ago. And so we put together like a big PDF and sent it to everybody for free. And we're like, kind of celebrating it as a community and everything. But if you go to my website, if you look at the opt-in page, it is that counter. It's like 12,423 people have had breakthroughs. Will you be the next one? Yeah. Sign up here, find out,
When it's this reinforcing cycle of like, oh, I'm a part of this community that has breakthroughs. And if I want to have a sense of belonging, even as simple as a newsletter, a sense of belonging as part of this audience, then I should be implementing the content so that I can have my own breakthrough, which is just so different for most people who are like, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Next,
exactly. Or like what's happened these days is there's so many newsletters and there's so much content, just in general, there's so much content that, I mean, I'm subscribed to a ton of newsletters that like I'll open it, my inbox in the morning, and it's like a 4-page article. I'm like, I don't have time. Like, I'm tired. I'll read this later. And then of course I never go back and read it. So we really wanted to optimize for simplicity, but also like just that deliverance of value and the sense of community. I would say the other thing too is people don't about future competition. Like one of the things, when I think back, there was a whole cohort of people that I could name, I know their names you would recognize, that built really successful blog businesses back in the early 2010s. And in hindsight, I think a lot of that success was just because there was a complete lack of competition. There was like there were no huge blogs for a lot of these niches that now, billions of dollars, right? So it's like, if you're the first one there and you're the first one who actually builds a really good blog and has a good course and has a good product, and that's a huge opportunity. But a lot of those people that I knew back then, they didn't realize that they were going to get competition was going to show up. And in a lot of cases, that competition, they're going to be better writers, they're going to be better video producers, they're going to put together better courses. And so if you're not, like, one of the things I'm always telling my team is, I say every year the bar gets higher, right? Like if we're not improving 10% every year, we're losing, like you can't.
You're not keeping up with inflation.
Exactly.
Right? The inflation in this case
is quality.
Yes. Yeah.
Every year, like the bar, like the average quality of content online gets probably 5 to 10% better. And it's funny now because if you go back and look at like the biggest YouTube videos from like 2018, they feel unwatchable now. Like it's becoming a problem for me because I have a bunch of articles that I wrote at this point 10, 12 years ago, and I go back and I'm like, this is unreadable. Like it's just bad. Like I either need to like rewrite a whole segment of my archive, or I need to like start thinking about getting rid of some of this stuff because it's just the standards and the expectations are just so much higher.
This big disclaimer.
Yeah. It's like, I wrote this when I was 24. Like, give me a break.
It's still here for like the internet
posterity,
archive. Yeah. Oh man. But yeah, it's good to look back on it and see the things that have changed. Like James and I were hanging out a couple weeks ago, and we're talking about books and planning things, and we're talking about the essay that I wrote, The Ladders of Wealth Creation, which published in 2019, so 5 years ago. And he was saying like, hey, you should revive some of those ideas. Maybe there's something in publishing there. And I was looking at it, I'm like, let me go and reread that and see if I even, and I reread it. I'm like, okay, I'd write that differently. Better example here. But this
still works. Yeah.
Still works. All right.
Yeah.
But it's weird. You both want that and you don't want it. You want to look back and be embarrassed by your work from years earlier.
Yes.
And at the same time, hoping you're not fundamentally wrong.
Right. I mean, it kills me a little bit just because I know that some of those old articles still get SEO traffic. So I'm like, there's still thousands of people that their first exposure to my work is this crappy written intro from 2012. I'm like, it just hurts a little bit. But the quality bar is just always getting higher. And if you're not improving, you're not. That's another thing I see a lot. Like I notice this with YouTube in particular. Like I see so many YouTubers on like Twitter and Discord complaining. They're like, I'm doing the exact same thing I did 3 years ago, but I used to get 1 million views a video. Now I get like 25,000. Why did YouTube shadow ban me? And I'll go look at their channel and I'm like, yeah, you've just been competed out. Like basically what happened was you had really good content 3 years ago, but it was just a talking head video. It was just you in your bedroom and people noticed. And now there's probably 100 other people that made the exact same videos talking about the exact same topics in their bedrooms. And so the views are getting split off between all of you. And because you didn't evolve and improve, you're now behind.
Right. Well, Mark, I think it's fascinating to hear about longevity in the business, doing this for a very, very long time. And I love the advice that you're giving on how people should think about it as they're getting started, like this next generation of creators coming in. Thanks so much for doing that. We're going to do a part 2.
Okay.
Where we'll dive into a bunch of details on your business today, how you're running the team, where you're going with it long-term, all of those things. So we'll pause for now, but where should people go to check out the YouTube channel, to follow you online and all that?
Just my name everywhere. So markmanson.net is the website. And then on YouTube, Mark Manson, Instagram, everything. Newsletter on Kit.
I love it.
Yeah.
Got all the things. Nice. Well, thanks. And we'll see everybody in part 2.
Cool.
If you enjoyed this episode, go to the YouTube channel, just search $1 Billion Creator and go ahead and subscribe. Make sure to like the video and drop a comment. I'd love to hear what some of your favorite parts of the video were and also who else we should have on the show.